morning meeting. You got the morning meeting. Good morning, everyone. Mark Halperin here with Sean and Dan to take you through the day. We will not discuss the Knicks loss because this isn't Morning Joe. We don't start the show with sports.
No, we're going to
As a,
start with the Celtics win.
yeah.
Oh,
Um, anyway, big game here tomorrow night, Dan. It's going to get me tickets, so that's where I'll be. Thank you for joining. This program, same format as yesterday. So if you're here yesterday, you know the deal. Raise your hand if you're here on the two-way platform. Peace, love, and understanding should imbue your every thought. And if you're on this platform or YouTube or X, do not put smack in the chat. I get a lot of emails about smack in the chat. Most of them are not serious, and some of them are filled ironically with smack. But there have been some very nice comments in the chat lately. I've been told. I don't read it, but I've been told. So thank you for those setting a good example. And for those of you still putting smack in the chat, really, it's not necessary or advisable. We will run through the day, and then I just got a text offered a Nick ticket, so that's exciting. We'll run through the day, and then thank you for that.
I'll be
And
on
then
Sean Hannity. I'm not going to
yeah,
be able to watch.
and we'll have your questions. So again, if you want to get in the conversation, please raise your hand. All right, the president's because he's in a different time zone. He's already done a lot today. He was in the Middle East, and he did a business roundtable, a roundtable with business leaders at the St. Regis in Doha. And there he said India was going to lower its tariffs. Basically, he says literally charge us no tariff. The Indian government has not responded yet. He also did a number of events, or did an event at a base, a military base called, anybody know how to pronounce this? I don't know how to pronounce it. Went to this base called Al Udaid Air Base. And there he made remarks. And if you look at anyone who tweets on the president's behalf, you will see that they were quite excited not surprising, any commander in chief shows up. So here is some of what the president said to the American forces at this Al Udaid Base 103, please. Take it back with the audio, or we don't have it?
He looked
All
good
right.
though.
He looked fine. Let me know when we have the audio. We'll play that. I'll continue on with the schedule while we wait. In any event, the president made his remarks there, and he's going to a state visit he's going to tour a mosque later today, and then he's got a state visit with in Abu Dhabi, and he's staying tonight at United Arab Emirates state visit, 6:30 p.m. local time. And then he's staying at the Ritz-Carlton in Abu Dhabi. So it is an all bonvoy trip. In all three stops, he's stayed in Marriott properties, and hopefully he's got a good account. Don't know what the vice president's doing today. Jerome Powell's giving a speech in Washington right now. House and Senate are both in. Big day for the reconciliation bill. 10 o'clock, Mike Johnson is meeting with what I call them, the salt zealots. I say that affectionately about our friend Mike Lawler, who's guest hosted this show, but um, uh, he's now being attacked by both Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gigot. So he's united Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gigot. Speaker Johnson's meeting with the Salt Zealots and with Freedom Caucus at 10 o'clock. They're going to try to solve SALT. Good luck. Sean Duffy, also at 10 o'clock, testifies before the Appropriations Committee on the Senate side. Hakeem Jeffries, 2 p.m. press conference. And 2:30, Tom Emmer is convening the full House conference to talk about reports basically from all the committee chairs to brief on their portion of the reconciliation package. This all in advance of what the Speaker still hopes will be a vote next week, even as the Senate talks about changing the bill dramatically, and even as we still don't know the X date to provide some clarity about when there actually be a forcing mechanism deadline. 10 o'clock also, Supreme Court hears oral arguments in this case that has two big issues at play. One is the question of birthright citizenship, the Trump administration's challenge to the previously constitutionally accepted notion that if you're born here in the United States, regardless of how your parents came here, you are a citizen. But also the issue of, can a district court judge of any persuasion issue an order or an injunction that they can say pertains to the whole country. And previous presidents, including Democrats, have increasingly found this to be not a great practice to have one district court judge say, I'm basically in charge of America. And so it's not clear to observers which of those or both, the Supreme Court considering one of those issues, both of those issues. There's almost certainly 4 votes, at least 4 votes for the president's position on the district court judge issue. I don't think anybody has a good whip count of the justices on the issue of birthright citizenship, but it's going to be an
I think
Yes,
one
sir.
one of the things on both of those issues that I have found fascinating, and even more so this morning in the write-ups, when folks in the media decide what's constitutional or not, to me, that is a problem. So when you read the write-up in some of these morning reads that the president is challenging these constitutional issues, the court decides what's constitutional or not pundits and media folks. And so I find it fascinating to read these things. The president challenging stuff is completely within the bounds of constitutionality. It is not a constitutional crisis to actually challenge things and have the court rule on them. In fact, that is well within the bounds of how the system's supposed to work. And yet I see folks on CNN in particular over and over again talk about a constitutional crisis and him challenging the Constitution. The mere bringing a case is actually how our system of government works. Because they don't like it does not make it unconstitutional.
Well, all I'd say is I haven't heard anybody say on these 2 issues it's a crisis.
Are you
They have
kidding?
on these
Birthright?
issues?
That has been an
They
absolute
said it's a
refrain.
crisis. All right, I haven't heard that. But I think what they're saying in this case, and again, as you know, Sean, I share your view of the general bias against the president and most of the press. But I think in these 2 issues, the precedents, the previous precedents, are against the president's position. You're right; he can
But yeah,
challenge
and
them.
that
But
again, part of it is, I have a guy named Josh Hammer on my show from time to time, and both him and Dershowitz and these guys, it's like when you hear it's for some reason the media defaults to all of these left-wing legal pundits, which is fine. Everybody gets this is what we do on politics, is talk about things based on our background. But it doesn't make it so. And I think that whether it's CNN or Politico, that they get to decide what's constitutional or what's in bounds. If you're actually going through the process, that by definition is actually working within the Constitution. And I've gotten tired of listening to these people decide that because Trump is challenging something, he's somehow undermining the constitutional norms that we have.
Dan, anything you want to say about the case?
Which case? I mean, I could be very
Well,
curious to see.
It's one case. It's got 2 issues at play.
Yeah, I'll be very curious to see, and it's interesting to hear, conservatives now complain about this, because when the court was, stopping Democrats, it was cheerleading that they needed to do it. So we'll see.
Oh, listen, I just want to be clear though. Not you, but one.
Nobody has the planes or the missiles or anything else. And as your commander-in-chief, I'm here to say that America's military will soon be bigger, better, stronger, and more powerful than ever before.
All right. So obviously they like that. I'd love to hear from the commander in chief. But here's what they liked more: getting a chance to see live something probably all of them had only seen on television. Roll that, please. I think I need to tell you which one that is, but maybe I do.
Young man, there's no need to feel down. I said, young man, pick yourself off the ground. I said, young man.
All right. Nothing like quite like seeing that in person. All right, enough of that. All right. There's some data out this morning on inflation that suggests inflation's not so bad, that it's tempered. But then Walmart announced just a few minutes ago that they're going to raise prices because of the tariffs. That will get a lot of focus today. So let's just start there on the economy. Dan, it is, as we say, mixed. The markets, we'll see what happens on the open, but the futures look fine. What's your sense of where we are in the economy?
Look, I think the economy is holding relatively strong, which is good news for the country, good news for the president. I think the worry is companies have held off raising prices and they perhaps cannot hold off much longer. So you're hearing Walmart, which has had to restock its shelves, get ready for, the summer rush and then ultimately back to school, saying we're going to have to start to do this. I think the other interesting story on the economy is Trump complaining about Apple moving out of China, not back to the United States, but moving manufacturing to India. There have been other companies that have quietly said the same thing on earnings calls that they're leaving China to go to other markets. And he's not happy about it. And I'll be very curious. Apple so far has no comment, but that's a big kind of under the radar economic story.
Sean.
It's interesting that one of the things that I have found fascinating is what the White House refers to as the Trump effect. And they have a website, whitehouse.gov /investments. And it lists all of the companies. Dan mentioned Apple, Nvidia, Eli Lilly, et cetera, that are now upwards of, I think it was upwards of $3 trillion of direct investment in the United States. And then you see this investment commitment from first Saudi, then Qatar, and now in the UAE, literally trillions of dollars. And none of that was baked in any economic expectation or forecast, right? So if you think about and again, I will remind everyone I got a D in economics. But I got to believe even with a D in economics, you got to say 5 trillion plus additional dollars of direct U.S. investment has got to be very positive for the U.S. economy. That's not baked in any of these expectation or forecasts that are coming out. So I think that's the one factor that no one's talking about, that no one's considering, and not giving, frankly, him credit for either.
Well, I think the one thing, though, to be fair, like I agree with you, Sean. And on this trip, he's got, some pretty solid pledges. We heard a lot of this in his first term and it never materialized. The second thing is some of these commitments had already been made, but they kind of put a bow on it and gave it to him to say, like, because of you, when in reality, that's not the case. They had announced it, a few years ago. So I think you're right. If all of this materializes, amen. Like it will be a huge success story for the United States. But I think there is some skepticism about what will ultimately happen. But we'll have to
sure, but even, I think that there's the political piece, which you're touching on, but I also think from an economic standpoint,
Yep.
Some of these same people who are all doom and gloom now were the same people in the first term who, prior to Trump getting elected, saying if he's elected, the economy will go into a tailspin, and we had one of the best economic periods up to COVID. And so it's almost like some of the same people in the media. I just don't buy it. And that's why I think that we're going to continue to, when these forecasts come out, and the other day we saw, was it CPI, today PPI, and they're not where everybody thinks they are. It's because they're not factoring in a lot of these other issues.
Guys, do either of you want to say anything about the trip, or can we move on?
I got to say, I'm continued to, the speech was great. From the production standpoint, I think it's challenging because of the time difference and stuff, but I think that this has been a huge success for the president, and both in terms of deliverables, in terms of visuals, and obviously beyond just that, you've got the Syria piece, the Iran piece. We'll see, the jury's out on what's going to happen in Turkey. But I think that this has been a big plus for the president overseas, and a huge contrast based on over the last 4 years.
Dan?
I completely agree with you. I actually think it's surprising. I am surprised Trump is not getting more kudos for some of the stuff he is doing. Like one of the things I think is super admirable is he is not bound by groupthink. He does not just do what like the United States has always done. Sometimes that's maddening, and I think he's off the mark. But this trip, I think, has been a huge success for him and for the United States. And I think he does deserve some credit for this.
So I'll say this. First of all, if you're ever done presidential advance, particularly on international trips or like me covered it, A plus. The advance on this trip has been spectacular. The Michael Diva rule, the pictures have been incredible. I'm not as impressed with the deliverables, Sean, as you are. But here's what I'm most impressed by, and it's crystallized by something Axios
Wait,
wrote
can I
this
just ask
morning.
why? Why are you like what? I joke.
It's just not
About
clear.
this last night, but
It's just
true.
I'm not
Biden
saying
went to Saudi, he got a fist bump. When Trump went, he got investment in the U.S.
well, he's got pledges of investment in the U.S. I just want to see if it actually impacts the real lives of real people. I'm not saying it's a failure. I just think it's too soon to say. It's possible, and I still think there might be a big diplomatic announcement. I may be wrong, but I want to show you what Axios said. This is 106. They interviewed a bunch of Biden foreign policy hands, some on the record, some on background, and here's what one person said, and I think this is really key. When it's talking about Donald Trump, when his personal instincts coincide with the national interest, it's pretty remarkable how quickly he can move. Sean, you've seen this firsthand, but I think it's a really underappreciated aspect of Trump, and it was true in the campaign too, which exactly what this says. If Trump wants to do something, and it's a good idea for America, he can just move. He doesn't say let's refer it back to the deputy assistant secretary and you all decide. He just says let's do it. And you've seen that on this trip in some small ways, and then some big ways like the Syria thing. He just does it. Dan.
Yeah, and Dan commented on that a minute ago, and I think that's absolutely like, look, the thing that's so great about dealing with Trump is that you're not. I mean, I've worked in the Bush administration and in and around government for 30 years. It's mind-boggling and frustrating sometimes how the process works, right? Trump doesn't give a crap about the process. He's like, get it done, and that is so refreshing from a make it happen standpoint. He gives people a very, very long leash when it comes to delivering. You can hang yourself with that same leash, but the ability to go out there and do things is remarkable.
Yeah,
Dan.
and Sean, you and Mark may know better, but my sense is he's not bound by the fear of failure as much. Like he doesn't want to fail, but he's such a good kind of salesman that like he will charge the hill. If it doesn't go well, he's going to pivot. He's going to tell you, why it's good. He's going to attack his enemies. And that front foot posture allows him to be very nimble and very aggressive, whereas so many other politicians just live in fear of failure and negative headlines and how am I going to get at? And I think it's one of his better attributes as a leader. Sometimes it goes to his detriment, but on a trip like this, you see it.
Yeah. The full story of how Trump survived the Access Hollywood tape has never actually been told. Some of it has, but the full story hasn't. And in that period of 3 or 4 days, Trump made these kind of decisions with great instincts and ferocity and confidence, even as he recognized the existential threat. And I think it's just, I don't know that if you're a Democrat who wants to be a president or you just want to be up against Trump successfully, I don't know if it's something you can learn or improve at, but Trump has it innately. And it's just an incredible advantage.
It's
Incredible
confidence.
advantage.
I can't. There are days when you literally are thinking defeat is standing right in front of you, and to Dan's point, he's like, "Great, then go the other way, grab that other thing, and call it." And you're like, I just, you're right. I've never seen anybody do it like
Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton has the same thing. Bill Clinton was down and out, but he was less decisive than Trump. Bill Clinton would agonize over decisions, and Trump consults. But when there's a deadline to decide, Trump just decides. And again, for those who want to say I'm here praising Trump and saying he's the greatest thing ever, this is just facts, guys. So understand, it's just a fact about Trump. Now, this is germane for our next topic, which is Iran. There are people on Red Twitter and in the columns who are on the right, neocons, I don't know what you want to call them, but who are hostile towards Iran and distrustful, who say basically tautologically, there's no deal with Iran they'd like. Right. And this is like my friend Mark Wallace, who has worked tirelessly. Ambassador Wallace has worked tirelessly on this issue. And he and I have talked about this many times. There's just a school, the Spicer Wallace school, that says if it's a deal with Iran, it's bad. And you say,
Yep.
well, let me tell you the details of the deal and how good it is for us. And also let me tell you what the alternatives are to no deal and how bad those are. And the Wallace Spicer school says, don't care. It's a deal with Iran, it's bad. They can't be trusted. And so that school says sanctions, rhetoric,
Blockade.
military threats, blockade. And so, but nonetheless, Donald Trump has spoken in the last 24 hours very positively about the prospects of a deal. So, Sean, I ask you, are you willing to look at a deal, or are you from the Spicer Wallace school says if it's a deal with Iran, you're against it?
I'm against it. Tell
I
me
mean,
what it
his
is.
name's on the building. How can?
Yeah.
Look, first of all, I will say this. This goes back to, if the president always believes he can get a deal. Always. That is just to your point about it, like in his DNA. The harder the deal, the harder he'll work to get it, right? He wants to defy expectations, and I respect the heck out of him for that. That being said, I think you can, quote, get to a deal with Iran. I don't think you can ever trust them. I don't think that there is enough verification that will ever be possible. So I believe that you blockade the hell out of it. You choke them off of all of their oil opportunities and sales, and just literally dry them out. That's frankly, to me, that's a much more viable option because you get what you want, and isolate them. But to me, I think it's a fool's errand to think that you can ever trust Iran, ever.
Dan, are you in the Trump school or the Spicer Wallace school?
I am in the Trump school, which is also, by the way, the Barack Obama school. Because I mean, there's so many ironies here about how much Trump has gone 360 degrees or 180 degrees on some of these issues. But I mean, this was the calculus that Barack Obama made. That, I mean, look, Sean, I agree with you. You can't trust them. The problem you have is we can blockade them with Europe all we want, or try to. One, the Europeans are no longer completely aligned. Two, they're just going to go to China and Russia. So they have viable options to sell services and goods and buy services and goods. And you have the Israelis standing there who are getting very, very antsy here and are not pleased. They're not pleased that they're not being consulted on some of this. You know, the stories that they're finding out information through espionage, not through consultation. Same stories we heard about in the Obama era, for which we were attacked repeatedly by one Donald Trump. So I think Trump is doing the right thing. The question is just ultimately Iran has other options. And I think you're right, Sean. They won't follow all the deal. Just like China and India won't follow.
But the problem is that this is a deal with their ultimate goal. I mean, again, two things. One, what's their short-term goal? To get a nuclear weapon, right? Number two,
they pretty much almost have.
Right. I mean, so that's and so they're buying time more than anything else. And number two is they literally will go out there and say death to America. This isn't the kind of group that's like, oh, all right, well, there's a deal that we have.
All right, hold on.
Half the people he's meeting with right now say the same thing.
We got to move on. We got to move on. A little bit of breaking news. Don't look at your phones, guys. Don't look at your phones.
I look at the camera and you guys.
JD Vance, the White House just announced JD Vance is going with his wife to the Pope's inaugural mass on Sunday. Okay.
So is he going to Turkey too then?
It's a double date. What couple is going with the Vances to the Pope's inaugural mass?
Kamala Harris?
No.
Oh, Marco and his wife.
Jeanette. Okay. Correct. Very nice.
Yeah.
Very good guess, Sean.
In the Catholic family.
All right. Let's do these next group quickly, even though they're momentous. Russia, Ukraine. Zelensky is in the Turkish capital, which is, as you know, not Istanbul, to meet with the Turkish strongman, as I like to call him. And Putin's not there. There's a lowish level Russian delegation. Dan, what do you think will happen today in Turkey? Anything?
Putin will just keep stalling.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Sean, Marco Rubio is there. We can show the arrival while Sean answers. But what do you expect out of Turkey today? Anything?
I hope, because I don't know what to expect, I hope that Rubio expresses the president's disdain for Putin's lack of willingness to come to the table, and that there is some economic aspect or sanction or what have you that gets announced. Because I think that I've said this all along. I really thought that Putin would be smart enough to go and at least buy time. I don't think that he was going to get it. I mean, it's like Iran. I don't think that he was ever going to get a deal. but I think he should have been smart enough to say, okay, at least I got to play the game, and he didn't do that.
Okay. Quickly, anything you want to say about let's say somebody who's on here was wagering on reconciliation. So he just wanted some tips. Sean, what's your latest take on where we're headed on reconciliation?
I am going to bet all of Dan's money that it passes still.
Yeah.
I
Do you
think
think the House will vote next week?
I don't. So I am of a belief that there's at least I was in the 2 fits and starts, and now I'm going to 3. I think it's going to slip. I think that these people in Washington that believe that Mike Lawler is going to cave don't get it. You might be able to, as I said yesterday, of the SALT caucus, which let's call it 6. I think you might be able. As I maintained, I think you'll get to 50. They'll buy 2 off, maybe 3. But Lawler, this idea that he's going to fold, that he's all in, baby, and I just don't buy it.
Well, but maybe they can get to a number he can live with. But here's what I don't get about the politics of this, Dan. Like, I understand Mike Lawler has like a bluish purple district, but would he really lose if he compromised on salt? Would that really be an issue that his opponent in a general election would be able to beat him on? Just
Depends
seems like
it depends what the compromise is. I mean, if it's
well, but is he going to lose if it's 30? If the cap is 30 versus the cap being 60, like, is that really what voters are going to vote on?
I mean, I can't tell you how much that matters to people. I mean, yeah, I think.
Well, I know, but do the people who it matters to have a firm line in the sand? Like, he'll get what he can get.
Well, look, to your point, Mark. I will say this. My view is I headed up incumbent retention at the NRCC in 2000, and I'd always get so-called moderates that would walk in and say, "I can't vote for this," and I'm like, "Dude, you're going to get attacked for it anyway. You voted for the motion to recommit or whatever it is. So, like, you're pregnant. You can't just make this go away."
So ask who's the head of the NRCC?
Richard Hudson.
Say to Richard Hudson, raise me, $500,000 and I'll vote for it. Like, it just doesn't seem like the difference between 30 and 60.
No. You're right. But I think in the case of Lawler and Stefanik in particular, less so Nicole Malliotakis maybe. But I think for some of these guys, like this is the hill they want to die on. And
I get it. But what I'm saying is,
I get you're arguing 30 versus 40 versus 50.
Right. No. You're right.
Get the best number, declare victory.
Right. No. So you're right. I don't think politically it matters whether you get 50 or 30 or 60.
But they're only doing it for the politics.
Right.
They have no principled adherence to one percentage over another.
Yeah.
I just find it confusing. I'm not trying to make an argument except to tell you.
But
I'm confused.
I find that there's politicians have issues that they personally care about, and it's like sometimes it's a VA cemetery, and you're like, you got to be kidding me. This is what you're going to fight over. I watched a member in the cloakroom break down crying once because of a VA cemetery. There are things that you can't wrap your head around. Going, this is literally what you care about.
All right, Dan, quickly.
I think the thing is, and I keep going back to this. Trump pledged this. He needs the moderates. He can make the Freedom Caucus fold. He has a harder time making Mike Lawler, who, by the way, he's driving out of the governor's race. So
probably
that's he endorsed him for re-election. So
but
that
you do realize, I will just say this. If you had to choose, if you put your leadership hat on for a second, who would you rather run for governor if you had to keep a seat? Would you rather have Elise Stefanik run or Mike Lawler run?
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Elise Stefanik also, because there's enough hard feelings now that they'd like her out of the building. So, all right, quickly, 2 more topics, then we're going to take your questions. Please raise your hand. 1-word answer on this one, guys. Gavin Newsom yesterday, as part of his budget proposal, said no more health care benefits for people in the state illegally. Yes or no? Yes or no? Does that decision have anything to do with presidential aspirations, or is it simply budgetary reality? Sean, does it have anything to do with presidential aspirations?
A parliamentary inquiry? Is this a trick question?
It's not. Yes or no? Does it have anything to do with 28?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
The correct answer is no. All right. Lastly.
Then
later.
Why? What? You telling me that he suddenly cares about immigration?
Later today, he needs the money. They can't afford it. Later today, on Next Up, I'll be talking to Meghan McCain of Two-Way about the latest developments in this book from Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson about Joe Biden. And Ro Khanna has now come out with about the most full-throated statement I've seen from a Democrat saying, we were wrong to cover this up. We should have been more honest about what we saw. He said, I didn't see it firsthand, but it acknowledges that, people who called for Joe Biden to step down were right earlier. Now, the biggest news in the book, in a book that the New York Times says has no news in it, is George Clooney's account. It doesn't say it's from Clooney, but anyone who knows how the world works knows it's from Clooney. Clooney said backstage at the famous fundraiser that that Joe Biden didn't recognize him. And that it was horrifying to Clooney that how could someone he'd known for many, many years not recognize him? Last night on Two Way Tonight, Rufus Gifford, who was in one of the top two fundraisers along with Jeffrey Katzenberg, was on Two Way Tonight. And he was we actually said, were you at that event? He was. And listen to what Rufus said he saw. Rufus, were you at the famous George Clooney fundraiser?
I was, and I
Yeah.
I was one of the 8 people in the room when this infamous moment happened.
So
yeah.
do you think
Rufus was in the room?
Do you think it's true that he didn't recognize George Clooney?
No, is the answer to the question. And I mean, and not only that, it's like an absurd thing.
Right. So
what happens here is this: like George and Julia were standing in front. I was literally right there. George
Julia
and Julia
Roberts.
standing right in front of the curtains that get ready to just like take photos that they always do because as the presidents walk in. And then the advance guy comes in and says to President Biden and President Obama, President Biden, see George Clooney and Julia Roberts. And, it was, I will say this, when I read this in the book, I was like, this did never happen. Now, I will tell you this, I am not defending the president's performance in that event. He was out of it.
Okay. So Rufus also said he was interviewed for the book. And the book, as best I can see, does not contain an alternative account. It contains what is obviously Clooney's account. So that's one issue. But the other issue is, here's a guy who was right there and says he saw it completely differently. So, Dan, what do you make of Clooney v. Rufus? And keep in mind, they're both sharp-dressed, handsome men. So don't let that factor into your adjudication.
And Rufus is a very good friend, and he was there. I will always give Rufus the benefit of the doubt, but what I will say is somebody is not telling the truth. There were multiple people in the room, as he said. I have not heard President Obama or anybody else come out and say, which they could very easily do, that is simply not true. Instead,
Rufus did though.
Rufus did, but I'm saying in terms of Rufus says one thing, Clooney, let's say, says the other. What say the other people in the room?
Right.
And in that regard, I think their silence, and this goes back to immediately after that event, there were murmurs that Barack Obama was somewhat horrified about what he saw. And Rufus says he was out of it. But no one's cleaning it up other than
I'm not. You said lie. I'll just say it's not clear. They might. Well, you did. You said somebody's lying, but it could be they just had different impressions of the moment. Sean, you're a student of the media and of backstage fundraiser of moments. What do you make of this?
Two quick things. Number one, there's a great exchange on the word lie from Dan Crenshaw in the Energy and Commerce Committee that I think is just made me laugh when Dan said that. That's worth Googling. Number two, Ben Smith needs to work on figuring out how to get a better shot. So Ben, I know you watch. Let's work on your shot.
Well, it was his two-way debut. We were happy.
I know, but even
Ben
for
Smith
a guy who was a
Semaphore.
media critic, he should be a little bit more attentive to his settings. So Ben's a smart student.
We'll take that note.
Thank you.
Ben's a room raider on the side.
so let's get to the issue. I am coming down on the side of Rufus on this, and why? It's if you listen to how Rufus explains the scenario, he's absolutely right. Republican, Democrat, because he goes on in that clip to talk about standard protocol, and he's absolutely right. Whether or not it's Donald Trump, Barack Obama, or Bill Clinton, I get when you go to the receiving line at like the Christmas party, right? They'll be like, Mr. President, Sean Spicer and his wife, that is protocol. And the way Rufus describes how that event unfolded is exactly precise in terms of how the introductions to a president at an event, whether it's a fundraiser, a Christmas party, whatever, happen. And so I believe his account because that's literally protocol how it would happen.
Well, the
And just to be
only
clear,
thing,
and Rufus is on the record, and Clooney is hiding behind anonymity.
I mean, the only thing I will say, having done a million of those and being the staffer who stands there and you look and say, Sean, Mr. President, you remember Sean and Mrs. Spicer, is you can absolutely tell when somebody recognizes and remembers the name because you start chit-chatting and they'll, remember. And when they can't, John Kerry was so bad with names and you would constantly try to put it back into the conversation into 30 seconds. That I could see an instance where everything Rufus says is right. And to some extent, George Clooney is right.
So, but Dan, the difference is it's not the recognition isn't facial. It's not like, oh, I didn't. When you say, Mr. President, George Clooney and Julia Roberts, it's not like he goes, now who is Clooney? Where do I know that from? Clooney.
You know what Mr. Smithers would say? Clooney, eh? Doesn't ring a bell. You would say. One more thing about this topic, and then we're going to your questions. We're not going to talk about the planes today. Sean, does CNN's media critic, or whatever he is, Brian Stelter, ever disappoint? He's always right there whenever we need him, right? So we're talking about this issue of how they dealt with Rufus's account. The Brian Stelter, CNN's media critic newsletter just came out, and his lead item about the book, he's also on the side a publicist for his friend Jake's book. He says the book admirably the authors hired the New Yorker's famed fact-checking department head, Fergus McIntosh, to ensure everything in the book was fully buttoned up. So I'd be curious what Mr. McIntosh would say about Rufus's account, which is not included in the book as an alternative interpretation of what occurred.
Well, and one of the things that we're not talking about is, again, it's not just Rufus versus Clooney, right? I mean, Jake Tapper is complicit in this now. He is complicit in trying to create a narrative that clearly there are opposing views to. And for a guy who is so sanctimonious about misinformation and whatever, it just continues to blow my mind how this gets overlooked. The guy is literally going to profit from spreading misinformation and for being complicit in the cover-up of Joe Biden.
Those of you who enjoy this topic, please join me on Next Up later today on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Michael, welcome in. Thank you for being part of the two-way experience. Please tell folks where you are, what is on your mind.
Yeah, I'm from New Prague, Minnesota. Been watching here for sometime before the election.
Awesome.
And it came to me by the algorithm, I guess.
Beautiful.
So I finally jumped on the two-way platform. This is the best thing that I can offer my kids who have a radically different approach to politics than I do. But this is the most reasonable place to come to hear both sides and to be heard. So I really appreciate the platform.
Michael, thank you. How old are your kids?
34 and 37.
And what's their orientation in politics compared to yours?
They're moderately on the left.
Mm-hmm.
I would be probably moderately in the middle.
Got it. Okay. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed. Do your kids watch too, or just in the abstract?
We're working on it.
Okay. We'd welcome their participation. Thank you for joining. We'd love to know what's on your mind.
Yeah, I watched last night with Rufus, and I keep hearing this kind of repeated mantra. Joe Biden had good days and bad days. So my question is, if we accept that, and that's been going on for a while, how satisfied then is the populace with a president who's having good days and bad days?
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's a disqualifier.
Yeah.
And the party in control at the time should have taken that seriously and invoked the constitutional remedy.
Michael, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that question, because I've had that conversation with Biden people who would say to me, well, he has good days and bad days. And I'd say, if a CEO of a company, they said, well, he has good days and bad days. They say, well, no, the CEO needs to have just like a series of consistently good days. So I've never understood that defense. I think it's factually true, because we saw him at the State of the Union. He was fine at the State of the Union.
But he read a teleprompter.
No, he didn't. No, he did plenty of riffing at that State of the Union. He didn't just read the teleprompter.
Dude, if you rest for as long as you did,
Sean, he had
Red Bull.
but he had other good days. He had other good days. It's not like he had 99 bad days and one good days. I can't give you an exact calculation, but he had plenty of good days. But again, I go to Michael's points right on point. It's not, that's just not a defense to say, well, he had some good days. And it's also, I will say, not a defense to say, well, he's fine between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. That's not a defense either, because the presidency does not work like that. It's not like hosting a two-way program where you can just do it for an hour and then go take a nap.
I mean, I think the challenge, Michael, is that when they put points on the board those first 18 months, passing all that legislation, if you go back, the headline was always, or the story was always, Biden was in private, twisting arms. Like, he never used the bully pulpit. He was never out there, right? Because he couldn't. They couldn't risk that he was having a bad day. They couldn't risk the, kind of public freeze-ups. So I think when the midterms happened and Democrats overperformed, I think their collective takeaway was, we're being successful and the public is just rewarded us for the last 2 years, essentially, right? Because they exceeded expectations. Rather than saying, as you and Mark just said, he is so severely limited. Like, the Biden pushback today is, does anyone have an example of when Biden was not able to make a decision? Well, perhaps the decision needed to be made at 8 p.m. and it wasn't made the next day till noon. Perhaps, when he was not having a good day, they had to delay it in general. Like,
that's their one pushback. And Dan, as you suggest, it's just crap. It's just crap.
It is crap. I'll tell you this. I work in the healthcare industry. I was a federal prison chaplain for 20 years, did 8 years of hospice, and now I work with long-term and cognitive care. And to me, for several years, just watching President Biden's gait, his facial expressions, the Parkinsonian affect, the president could not function on many, many situations. I'm sure of it. Plus what I saw with my own eyes.
Yeah.
So here's my question. If we can't move past the political expediency of someone who's a commander in chief, the nuclear football, all of those things, diplomacy, whatever, and impose the remedies that's provided in the Constitution, whatever party it is. I'm 65. I've 25, 30 years left on this earth. I got kids and grandkids. It would be my expectation and hope, maybe altruistically, that we could move past this for the good of the country, the nation, and the world, and our future. And that's where when I listened to Rufus last night talk about good days and bad days, I'm going, that is not an excuse. And if Rufus saw that, how can he? I know he's a lawyer and he's a partisan, and I appreciate that. But still, can't we rise above this a little bit?
Is Rufus a lawyer? Did you say he's a lawyer?
No, he's not a lawyer.
He's not a lawyer.
He's not a lawyer.
One of the points the book makes, which is correct, is that he shouldn't have run in 20. And he shouldn't have run in 20 in part because of Hunter.
Right. That's the other.
But he also shouldn't have run because of his condition. And I will tell you, the press's failure, Donald Trump was held accountable, not for everything, but for plenty of things in the 20 election. Plenty of things. The press did not hold Joe Biden, who campaigned from his basement because of COVID, who didn't do interviews, who clearly was exhibiting cognitive decline. The press is accountable. The Democratic voters chose him, though. But I will say the family should not have let him run. It shouldn't have even been a consideration in 20 or 24. It shouldn't have been a consideration, as far as I'm concerned, as someone who has a kid and someone who saw his cognitive decline, as I've said many times. And not just lately, people on Twitter saying, "Oh, why didn't you say this before?" I saw it in 2017, and I've been saying it since 2017.
Well,
Sean.
Mark, you said that the Democratic voters chose him. He was the choice offered.
No, there were 20 people running.
There was
in
a lot of
2020.
people.
I'm talking about in 2020. I'm talking about in 2020. He shouldn't have run. The family shouldn't have run.
Right.
The press should have scrutinized him more. But in the end, the voters chose him.
Well,
so.
After the primary, they chose him in the general election, but I just can't help but believe that he was put forward by the powers that be within the party.
No, the powers that be didn't want him. He ran on his own.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't win Iowa. He didn't win New Hampshire. Jim Clyburn kind of pushed him forward because our party traditionally snaps back. They flirt with the most progressives, and then they kind of tend to go back to the safest choice, which was Biden. Right. And he gets in there. I also just quickly, don't underestimate, this is a guy who served in a body that had Strom Thurmond, Robert Byrd, and a bunch of people that basically were way past their prime. The staffs ran the office. They wheeled them out for votes. And Joe Biden saw this as like, you can be successful. You can get reelected in these states, even though you're way past your prime. And by the way, look at our leadership. Look at how many committee chairs are in their 80s and really should not still be in office. So like our party has a problem beyond Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Sean.
The one group of people, and I mentioned this yesterday, so I don't need to go back to my clippable moment, but I will say that the staff around him has been the least accountable group, right? So Anita Dunn, Ron Klain, Jen Psaki, Corinne Jean-Pierre, people who came out publicly and said he's in great shape. I see him all the time. Corinne Jean-Pierre, you know, again, as a guy who owns a lot of you lied and you deceived us or whatever, your priorities are out of whack if you think that what I said was a problem, but you don't have a problem with Corinne Jean-Pierre saying on live television that he runs circles around her. That is a blatant lie.
Yeah. And again, the media now led by this author, now they're saying, how dare these people engage in a cover-up? When they sat there silently while they lied right before their eyes and said, best, run circles around me. Can't keep up with him. He's so amazing. Right on top of that subject matter. And they just accepted those answers on TV sets in the White House briefing room, Ben sets
Smith,
in the briefing
as
room.
much as I was joking about his set, he did make some good points. There was all of there's this pattern. The Hunter Biden laptop, the cover up here, right? Over and over again, people on the right are called conspiracy theories, wackadoodles, etc. And then suddenly that's, oh yeah, you were kind of right. Over and over again on subject after subject. And the media then turns around, and what I just crushes me on this is that they are literally going to profit from the cover up of these stories and now to pretend that they're part of the solution.
I would say they have not come clean on Biden Inc. They're still lying about Biden Inc.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean,
incredible.
And by the way, none of this is, there's literally evidence after evidence, person after person that has said, here's the deal. This is my conversation with the big guy. Here's emails to prove it. And literally, no, that can't be true.
Yeah. And let me say again to those of you who say, why aren't you talking about Don Jr. and his business deals? Why aren't you talking about Donald Trump's acceptance of the plane? Why aren't you talking about Stephen Miller's threat to get rid of habeas corpus? Those things get talked about plenty, lots of places. What's not talked about is the necessity in our democracy to have a Democratic Party with credibility. Look at the latest AP poll about what people think about the Democratic Party, and to have a news media that has credibility. If you want Donald Trump held accountable, you need to have those two institutions have credibility. And this is not some small thing. We had a commander-in-chief with severe cognitive decline who was allowed to not only stay in office, but almost be the Democratic nominee because the media and the Democrats engaged in a cover-up together. That's why it's important. That's why we're spending so much time on
members of the
this.
Democratic elected officials. I mean, that's the third stool of that leg that they protected him when the party rank and file said he's too old.
100%. And when Dean Phillips and other people tried to say it, they were shunned and criticized and often blackballed from the media. One of the few people with the courage to say it who was an elected official, and look how he was treated from Michaels, Minnesota. Michael, thank you for coming on and spurring the conversation. Bring your kids next time, if you can. Thank you. All right. Kyle, welcome in. Glad to have you here. Please unmute yourself.
Yep.
Tell everybody where you're from and what's on your mind.
Yeah, I'm from Las Vegas, and I love this show. I made a tweet about it yesterday, a post about it yesterday. Mark, I mean, you're the next Tim Russert. You are the Tim Russert of today, and Sean and Dan are fabulous. And I'm a full-fledged Republican, voted for Trump 3 times. And just to let you know, I heard about you through Red Eye Radio back before the election started, and they really promote you quite a bit. So love the show. It's
very
fantastic.
great for you. Thank you for your overly kind words, and we're glad to have you part of the community. So thank you.
So one thing yesterday, and Dan, if you watch the 3 o'clock show yesterday with Rufus, it's just fascinating the dodging of questions and not being honest. And I think that holds back the Democrat Party. I love it because I don't think the Democrat Party has a chance in the next 8 years because of the kept denying, the dodging of questions, not just being honest. And Mark, you tried to hold him accountable multiple times. I mean, it was a great interview, but he kept dodging, and you could see he was getting irritated. He was red in the face. So I asked Dan, why can't the Democrats, and not to say the Republicans are all honest and everything like that, but why can't they just be truthful? And I think if you were like yourself, you call balls and strikes, Dan. I got a lot of respect for you. I mean, you're fantastic. If the Democrat Party acted like Dan, they'd have a chance. So I'm just curious, like, why can't you just tell it like it is, your colleagues? And you know Rufus, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I know him really well. I won't speak for Rufus, but look, I think this is not unique to the Democratic Party. In the 4 years between the Trump terms, and even in Trump's first term, Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan and others mastered. I hadn't heard that. I'll let the president speak for himself. Like, people, you can either like kind of say what is really the truth and kind of kick the mule, so to speak, or you can just be like, there's no upside, they think, to kind of coming out and saying this. And so the party leadership, I mean, I don't know if you've seen Hakeem Jeffries' press conference the other day when he was asked about whether Biden, or you would want Biden to come campaign for people because Biden has offered. And he's like, we're only looking forward. I'm not even going to go there. So I agree with you. We have a credibility problem. I think it's frankly why we need new leaders. I think it's part of the reason that Schumer and Jeffries ultimately are going to have to go is they were there for all of this, and they're never going to come out and admit it. They're just not.
So Kyle, I will say this. First of all, thank you for your kind words. I appreciate your support and you watching the show. And I actually probably thought Rufus is straightforward as he can be.
Yeah.
And why I say that is, especially after the scars of the first Trump White House, when you are given a position of trust in a campaign, or in a government office. I've worked for over 10 members of Congress, the president, lots of other leaders, private sector and government. I don't believe if you, I think that loyalty there's a difference between covering up and being loyal to someone for the opportunity they're giving you. I believe, and I also believe that's true of like friends, right? There are too many people in Washington, D.C. Who I think are willing to sell out for a clip or a book deal or whatever. And I can tell you on a personal level, it sucks when you can't have a conversation with people because you have to worry, oh yeah, in 3 years you're going to sell that story out on me because whatever. And so I think there's a difference. I thought Rufus leaned in as far as he could professionally, but you are given a position of trust and getting brought into the inner circle and the inner sanctum of someone's campaign or their work. And if they have to think in the back of your mind, and believe me, in Trump world, this is something that we dealt with on a daily basis, and I'm disgusted by the number of people that were colleagues of mine in the first Trump administration who sold out for a quick book. And I don't even think it's just a quick book. I think people who sell out to reporters to tell stories because they want to be seen in a CNN or Politico story are not people that I would want to surround myself with. And I thought that Rufus handled himself very professionally yesterday, and leaned in to the extent professionally acceptable, if that makes sense. So
Yep.
I think it's a great question that you're asking, but I just want you to get the insider perspective that as someone who wants to be able to work with people that you can actually trust and not have to worry about that it's going to get read on the Washington Post, New York Times, or Politico. He handled that very professionally, and I respect him for how he did that.
Yep. Kyle, thank you. Grateful to you. Rachel, welcome in. Please unmute. Tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind.
Hi, I'm from Texas. I kind of had a follow-up to the last person's question.
Yes, ma'am.
Last night, Rufus said that he was not familiar with the "Where's Jackie" comment, the dead congresswoman. And I appreciate that you've sort of brought this up repeatedly when people say, oh, well, the White House covered it up. And you say, well, this was public knowledge. So is that something that MAGA was very familiar with and the other side wasn't familiar with. I was a little astonished that he said he wasn't familiar with that incident.
Yeah. Rachel, it's the example I use all the time because I just think it's so clear cut. And and not only do a lot of people on the left not know about it, but the ones who know about it, no one has ever said to me, "Well, you're right. That's a pretty good example." They try to minimize it. They say, "Oh, everybody mixes up names," or "Oh, maybe the staff briefed him poorly." So I think part of it is a reflection of people are in their media bubbles, and so the blue people are not watching Newsmax or Fox or another place that's showing that clip over and over again. I've gone back and looked at how it was covered, in the dominant media, and it was barely covered. And it was certainly, if it was covered, it was covered in the moment. If Donald Trump had done that, or George W. Bush had done that, that thing would have been shown every day through Election Day. And it's to me, it's the clearest example of how the left and their media, the Democrats and their media allies, didn't want to face the truth about what was going on. And had they shared that clip and made themselves aware, then someone like Rufus, I think, would have had to confront the reality a little more directly than he chose to do or did. Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are so many examples of where in retrospect, people say, oh, okay, like, maybe, but in the time, like, remember the whole European trip was supposedly deep fakes and altered videos and everything. I think the other problem that hurts Democrats is Donald Trump says a lot of crazy things and he exaggerates and he conflates people. And Democrats say, look, when Donald Trump conflated Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi last summer, talking about who was in charge of the, Capitol, and they scream, see, like when people are tired, this happens, they misspeak and whatever. But I'll say this, Trump has been kind of like a 1,000,000-mile-an-hour, Scud missile for 50 years. That's just, so it could be that he's beginning to have some issues as he gets older. But I also could say, like, that's kind of, Trump being Trump. Whereas with Biden, again, I just go back to nobody would ever run a campaign in 20 and then go in and win and go into the White House. And the whole time, the theory is keep them out of the public eye. Don't use the bully pulpit. Don't say much. Don't do. The reason they did all of that was they knew he could not. And so when he was in public, trips and drabs of crumbs were put on the ground.
Sean.
Yeah, all I'll say to Dan's point is it's not one instance that people are saying, did you see this one thing? There was a constant stream of instances. The Jackie one, I think, is just much more illuminating because it's like you're literally calling out a dead person at an event that was meant to honor the dead person, right? So that's sort of jumps to mind, but you can name 30 other events where it was like, wow, he did this. So I think that's the bigger and broader issue here is that it was a true cover-up at the highest levels.
The other thing I'll say is there's two kinds of people. There are people who watched President Biden's debate performance and declared themselves surprised or shocked. And there are those of us who watched it and said, bad luck for the Democrats, but no surprise because he could have performed like that literally on any day, particularly at night. Rachel, thank you for joining. Grateful to you. Please come back. Sean, what do you have on tonight?
Well, we're going to keep this discussion going. We got a big panel coming your way. Larry O'Connor, Grace Curley, and Bradley Devon of the Daily Signal. But then I'll tell you this, I'm already looking forward to this tomorrow night, Steve Bannon. There's a lot. I will just give you one preview question. There's somebody who said to me, and I hope he's not listening, it's not just Donald Trump. Steve Bannon is rumored to be thinking of running in 2028. And I'm just going to clear the air.
Yeah. Dan's rumored to be running in 2028 too. Could be quite a matchup.
Wow, this is
Turrentine
going to be. What if
Bannon.
would you guys consider teaming up?
No. The series of Lincoln Douglas debates all across.
I don't want to get divorced. What are you talking
about? Dan, what are you doing tonight?
Nothing
Hannity.
Actually. I'll be on Sean Hannity tomorrow night. Was on Laura Ingraham last night. So
okay.
Watching Sean tonight.
All right. So let's see. I got to find my promos here. Moynihan Report, 7:00 tonight. It's already been recorded as a two-way, but it'll stream for the first time tonight at 7 p.m. Joshua Citarella. Citarella?
Is he related to the Cinderella grocery store here in New York?
I hope so.
Okay.
2-way tonight, 6 o'clock tonight. Don't forget to watch. We'll have all the day's news. And then, as I mentioned, on Next Up, my video podcast, which you'll be able to watch later today on YouTube or listen to wherever you get your podcast. Meghan McCain and I will talk more about Joe Biden and the credibility of the media and the Democrats. And Charlie Kirk will be my guest. I was on his program yesterday. He's on my program today. And we'll talk about MAGA and everything else in the news, and a little bit about how Charlie organizes his thoughts and his life. Very grateful to you all for joining. The three of us will be back in 23 hours. And of course, tomorrow's Friday, winners and losers of the week. And what to look for over the weekend.
David Hogg.
That's a feature. That's a feature you won't want to miss.
We have to take Biden off the table tomorrow. He can't be a loser. It's too
I think that's fair. That's it. You can use
Okay.
David Hogg if you want.
Yeah, or
he could be the winner.
Or Alex Thompson. Alex Thompson. Thank you all for joining. We'll see you in 23 hours. Have a good day.